The Poppy Playtime developers just dropped a ton of news about Project Playtime, Chapter 3, and even a little bit of lore as well. So basically, just about a day ago at this point, the developers started what they're calling the Poppy Playtime podcast on the Mob Games channel, where all the developers gather around and answer tons of community questions from chat and other submissions, giving us tons of information about what is going to happen in the game's near future. Now, this interview is an hour and a half long, so basically, I'm going to give you guys the rundown, starting with Project Playtime news. By the way, make sure to like the video if you enjoy, and as a reward, here's my cat and wrapping paper. So the first question that I wanted to talk about was, at any point in the future, will there be an updated UI? Where they responded, there's a lot of stuff in the works right now. The UI team is working on a lot of overhauls kind of across the board. Now, I'm assuming this is them talking specifically about Project Playtime, and it's really basic UI that we've been waiting for a fix on for a while. However, this could also apply to Chapter 3 just because they simply share the same exact UI, but we'll see in the future. The next question I wanted to bring up was, will there be any more moving mechanics like the rolling ones that we already have? Where they responded, yeah, that's been part of our experimental thing we've been doing. We can't really say which ones we're gonna put out yet, don't want to make any promises, but we have plenty in the works. So this essentially proves to us that there's going to be tons of new stuff put into the game as new maps and whatnot are added, which is really great news. And what I also found interesting on this subject is while talking about mechanics, they specifically said this.
And I was really excited to have the grapples in the game because it was a huge challenge to actually program those in a multiplayer game.
Now, when they say grapple mechanic, it's possible they could just be talking about Mommy Longlegs because she herself has a grapple, which would make sense. Or maybe they could be talking about how in the new map that's yet to be released, they have placeholders labeled around that are apparently for grapples in the future, which could suggest that the next new mechanic could be the player themselves jumping around the map, which would increase the intensity a ton. The next and probably most asked question about Project Playtime was, will there be Project Playtime Mobile? And to that they said, it is an active piece we are trying to get done, and when we are at a point being able to really show it off, we will do that. Or in other words, they seem to already be working on a mobile port of some sort, and we can hopefully expect that to release within the next year or so when the game finally ends up releasing out of early access and into the alphas and betas. The next Project Playtime related question worth mentioning was, will you ever collab with any other studios? Which is a really interesting question because there's actually been some slight rumors and hints that the devs may be teaming up with studios such as Bendy and the Ink Machine in the future, and it's something popularized by Project Playtime's own competitors such as Dead by Daylight or Monsters and Mortals, who they themselves are currently working with. But they responded to this by saying, it's an interesting idea, there's so much potential that Project Playtime can do, I definitely don't want to shoot it down, but I think it's an interesting concept. Now this, in my opinion, is basically them saying, if the opportunity comes, we may consider, however, for now, we're not working on anything specific, which unfortunately means that there isn't any Bendy collab or anything at least coming in the near future based on this answer to the question. The next one, now regarding Project Playtime's lore, is there ever going to be any more tapes or VHSs that we've had in the past, and any connection to the lore between the chapters and Project Playtime with said tapes? Where they responded, there was a strong conversation about what the tapes are and how they are influencing the lore itself. We definitely will be seeing the next phase of that very soon. Now this is a pretty big piece of news because it's them basically confirming to us that there's more tapes from the screening room coming, and that they are most likely already coming out soon. More specifically, I'm confident that the next VHS tape is probably going to drop whenever Season 2 of Project Playtime releases, which if you didn't know is an event that has been delayed quite a bit. It's almost been 20 days at this point. But I imagine that's when we'll get the next tape and maybe even more lore in the future. The last question relating to Project Playtime worth mentioning here was, does the team have any solid timeline or roadmap for the future of Project Playtime that they plan on sticking to? And if possible, will that ever become public for people to see? Where they responded, yes, there's a lot of things that are in queue that we've been working on. There is a roadmap, there is documentation, there is a graphic that will come out in said time. It will come out within this year. So essentially, if you didn't know, a roadmap is what a lot of game studios do to give themselves public timelines on when things are going to release, to give clear communication to the community and let people know what to expect in the next year or so. And apparently this year, we are going to be getting a full roadmap showing everything they're going to be adding. And also, although they only said Project Playtime roadmap, this will also most likely include the release of Chapter 3 as well, and pretty much everything relating to the Poppy Playtime universe. But moving on to Chapter 3 news, we also got a few different pieces of information worth talking about as well. For starters, the first question brought up was, will there be any more complicated mechanics, talking about Chapter 3 in Project Playtime, where the devs then responded with, we have some really interesting and new exciting mechanics lined up for Chapter 3. All we've been doing for a while now is we've just been in a room just experimenting with what is the next fun mechanic, game mode, characters. So similar to Project Playtime, it seems like there's going to be a ton of new mechanics in Chapter 3. And in fact, one of the ones in particular that we've theorized is being added into Chapter 3 is the gas mask that we saw from the teaser trailer, with the most popular running theory being that this mask will be some sort of new item mechanic that we will be seeing at some point in the future to hide from the gas inside of the factory. And this isn't even to mention that in their last Q&A, the developers already confirmed that there's going to be a ton of different hand colors to collect in Chapter 3, all with presumably new mechanics. So it sounds like this new chapter is going to have a ton of different game mechanics, especially since they said they're constantly testing new stuff. I'm really excited to see where this ends up going in the future. The next question that they answered, and by far the biggest one that you've probably already asked a million times, is when will Chapter 3 end up releasing? And while they actually responded to this by saying, we're not ready to communicate a set stone on its release time, but as other people have said, it's something we are working on and we want to make sure it's done correctly and done right. Because the quality of Chapter 3 as a user, as a community, you will see the increase of quality of that project. Now, this is honestly the answer we were probably expecting, even if it's disappointing. They obviously wouldn't just drop the release date on this podcast or anything, and even when it's done, we'll probably have to wait to get a full gameplay trailer or something before we can even think about getting a release date or even having the chapter finally come out. Now, to their credit, they've been giving us tons of little teases, both through Project Playtime and the little teasers being posted on their channel, so there is definite progress. However, this answer most likely tells us that they are nowhere near finishing the game, which is honestly probably what we expected. And if anything, it actually seems like they are almost exclusively focusing on Project Playtime only, trying to finish that game for its eventual release date before the back half of the year. And it makes sense. I mean, at least from what I've gathered from this podcast, it seems like ever since Chapter 2 released up until this year, they've almost exclusively been working on Project Playtime, which is how they were able to release it so quickly. Plus, while we got a lot of Chapter 3 news, this podcast was literally titled the Project Playtime Q&A. But with that being said, I wouldn't expect Chapter 3 to be releasing even in the first half of the year at all. Like I predicted in the past, it seems like the game will come out in the later parts of the year, assuming it doesn't get delayed, which might be more common than you think because Chapter 2 got delayed, Project Playtime itself got delayed, Project Playtime Season 2 is being delayed, so things have been getting pushed back rather frequently, but I digress. One bonus question I wanted to mention was, how often do you plan on doing the dev podcasts? Where they promptly answered, anytime we have a major update or something we plan on releasing, most likely we'll have a podcast around those times or in the middle of when the updates come out. Which means that for starters, this podcast is most likely in anticipation for Season 2, meaning it should finally be releasing in the next week or so. And it also means that there will be tons of podcasts with new features in the future. So if you want updates on those when they happen, make sure to subscribe here, check out this video, and peace.